On behalf of Joe Decker, President of AFCEA DC, thank you for joining us today. We're honored to host a webinar where you'll hear from DISA and industry experts that are creating the future each day as they work remotely and move their lives and organizations forward. First, you'll hear from our industry fireside chat, followed immediately by our DISA panel. There'll be a Q&A following each portion of today's event, so please use the chat function to submit your questions to the speakers. For optimal viewing, please keep your screen in gallery view. Your mics are automatically muted, but we ask that you keep your video off for the duration of today's events. Now I'd like to introduce Mike Quinn, our co-lead for today's event and AFCEA DC board member. Mike, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate everybody attending this afternoon. It should be some time well spent. So here's the scripted part of the program, and you can't click through it. You're just going to have to listen to it for about a minute. I'm the co-lead along with Jimmy, and before we begin today's programming, I'd like to thank our sponsor partners. Without our sponsor partners, we could not produce the year-long programs that cover key issues within our industry. Their contributions support AFCEA DC's scholarship program, which enables students to attend college to pursue a career in STEM. So a big thank you to our two executive sponsors, Dell and ID Technologies, and our platinum sponsor, Hitachi Vantara Federal. The AFCEA DC board works diligently to address timely and relevant topics for our members and our government customers. Earlier in the summer, we all agreed that our workplaces and lives would be dramatically different as we deal with the consequences of COVID-19. Part of the reason I was eager to help create the symposium was really based on the work that ID Technologies and the intelligence and law enforcement communities have been doing for the past several years to enable secure remote connectivity. March 2020 arrives, and this need moves broadly across all of government and industry. Today, you will hear from experts and leaders that are both creating and using solutions to enable all of us to be productive in a safe and secure remote environment. And you will learn about the standards set by NIST, NSA, and other agencies like DISA that are driving and supporting this effort. Again, I'd like to thank Joe Decker, AFCEA DC's president, Jimmy Adkins, and the Yes and team for making this event possible, and with our sponsors and government partners. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our industry panel and our moderator. So we have Bill Anderson. Bill is the president of CIS Mobile. Dan Carroll is an advisory systems engineer with Dell Technologies. Dylan Connor is the chief technology officer at ID Technologies and president of Archon, which is a division of ID. And Gary Hicks is the chief technology officer of Hitachi Vantara Federal. Moderating today's panel is Ross Wilkers. He's a senior staff writer at Washington Technology. So I welcome everyone, and now I turn this part of the program over to Ross and the panel. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Mike, for that introduction. Thank you to AFCEA for hosting this event to sort of discuss something that, frankly, we've all had to deal with within what it's been. We're in month number 6 of this world of working from home, and all of us having the same environment and you're just trying to find a work-life balance and also just use the technology at our disposal, whether we work in the public sector or even just cover it like someone myself. One of the things that I've sort of discovered in my conversations with some of the executives prior to today's discussion, and we were sort of talking about this late last week on our prep call for us to meet and greet and explore questions, is that in the commercial sector and for industry, the shift to a disparate workforce and remote work has been in the making for some time, and this shift has only accelerated that. On the government side, in the customer landscape, perhaps that's been a bit slower and been more difficult to realize given just the nature of the work that some agencies do. And so just to kick things off, we'll start from there, just with the customer side, and then we'll bridge to some topics on the industry. So Bill, I want to get this question for you. You have the luxury of going first on this. So customer flexibility on the disparate and home-based workforce. Just what have you seen that respect? Have you seen a change in attitude and a shift, maybe a struggle?
We've seen surprisingly, actually probably not surprisingly, we've seen a real uptick in interest. So with our particular business, we enable some mobility solutions for government. That's all we do, specifically around mobile phones. And we had engagements with sort of broadly across the Five Eyes community, from Intel agencies to DoD type agencies, that were using technology to enable remote work, mobile work, for what we would call sort of teams. So they'd be, enclaves of 300, 500 people who had a mission that they needed to accomplish. And they were being outfitted with this kind of remote work technology just to do their jobs in a specific instance. When this pandemic hit, the same agencies that we have relationships with called us up or in conversation said, look, we're thinking about deploying this on a corporate level now. We know it works. We've got a sponsor, whoever the IT guy that was running the team project. We trust this guy. And what happened is we had to send all our people home, and we realized that we were not prepared for them to be able to work securely. And obviously their job requirements are a little different from standard industry. You can't just, in a lot of cases, you just can't call up. You just can't access the data the same way when you're remote. These are all solvable problems, but they hadn't been solved. And as everyone here knows, solving a problem, particularly with the federal government, involves a lot more than solving the technology problem. It takes months and months and months to line up the ability to actually purchase things and deploy them and define. You know how bad it is. It takes forever. But what we saw was an immediate uptick in interest of people saying, look, we were kind of embarrassed. We sent everybody home and we realized they couldn't work. Turns out working's important. And can we maybe get some help from you guys to help us fix the problem? So definitely saw an uptick, and it's a sustained uptick. So even though defining a new project and getting it funded and rolled out might take 6 months to a year, the requirements are not going to disappear when the pandemic stops. If anything, this was just an eye-opener for everyone involved that, gee, we ought to stop telling ourselves that we're prepared for anything. We ought to stop telling ourselves that we're the best and the brightest, IT organization in the world and we can do anything, because reality was we weren't prepared for this, and we probably should have been.
Okay. So, Gary, were we seeing baby steps, leaps and bounds into this future? Is the future now?
Well, I think everyone was kind of forced into the future. No one, I think a lot of people found that they weren't prepared. They were prepared for telework, but they weren't prepared for it at the scale that it is now. And what you found was a lot of people there, they had their solutions. They're like, we just need to just go buy more of that. We'll figure it out on the back end. And I think one of the big surprises that they've seen is a lot of people, I think, shun telework a bit. And then what they found is people are actually, once you get them that secure access, the access to the appropriate data, give them the tools, they're more productive at home. Even if you have like the dog running through or the kid where in the past you would have been horrified if you were working at home and somebody ran into your room. Now it's commonplace. Like, oh, you have a family. Oh, look, these people are human. You get outside of the office collaboration zone, and I think it's much more productive. But getting that right infrastructure in place to support that type of workforce, as everyone in industry knows, because we've been kind of in that model for many years, it's difficult to really get it nailed down. So I think it is challenging, but we're seeing a whole lot more adoption, whole lot more less bumps in the road as people go along and kind of learn how to work in this remote work world.
Definitely one of the topics we're going to get into is employee engagement and dealing with what has become this national pastime of children and pets just magically appearing in the background of our Zoom calls. So Dan, kind of the same question, but working for Dell, you have, given where you work, you have a unique lens of working at a Fortune 500 company that may have had all of this in place, but also in some instances a government customer that is still figuring out but moving quickly, as we discussed earlier. What are you saying?
What I would say is what's interesting is I've had the lens of two different views, right? So I work for Dell, you're correct, and I've been working remotely from home for the last 15 years, right? I've always been a remote worker for a very long time. So when this happened for me, it was just, okay, it's the next day. Now, what a lot of people are experiencing is my daughter ended up moving back home with us, which happened to a lot of families, right? Because you needed to get everyone to some form of safety. She works for an animation studio. And when you think of an animation studio, you think they have, high-end technology, all that stuff. They were completely unprepared to handle remote work. They didn't have a scalable VPN solution to provide secure access. They didn't have a comprehensive solution for video conferencing because they were used to having all of their animators in a building for this particular studio and these particular projects. And in talking with government agencies and government organizations, it was very similar, right? They had some form of functionality, but how mature and how scalable it was a real wake-up call for them. And like you said at the beginning, we all kind of got thrown into the deep end of the pool when this started. So I think there's a lot that can be learned both in the commercial business and in the federal business in understanding that the problems are not that dissimilar.
So Dylan, to Dan's point, diving into the deep end almost very suddenly, and now we're in sort of month number 6 of what one IT analyst told me has basically been an extended snow day, if you think about it sort of that way. Just with it, and one of the things that we talked about on our prep call to the other points is that for your company, you had a lot of these things already kind of in a lot of that infrastructure maybe in place. So before we transition to the next topic, just share your insights and what you're seeing.
So I actually think it's been a pretty cool opportunity. There's no question this has been an incredible disruption for everybody's life and mission. But I think it's really forced us to re-examine what we think about in terms of security and the workplace and how we actually do our work. I think this is going to give us a chance to really adopt for real software-defined data centers and zero trust. I think that those are going to become watchwords that we all live by. And as far as my company goes, I think what we miss the most is the social aspect. It has definitely been a transition to move away from getting together and socializing either in the office or out of the office, as Dan said earlier. That has been the most difficult issue. But this new generation of collaboration platform, Zoom, Teams, and the like, has really done a lot of good. And it's funny, I called March the month of the hoodie because everyone just came to work in a hoodie and they stopped caring about what they look like, which is actually really refreshing and a lot of fun. But over time, we've actually seen people kind of adjusting themselves to the new norms. You've seen them conducting themselves in a more professional manner. You've seen folks that have, a light ring or a studio microphone or headphones that let them present themselves more like a professional teleworker or professional podcaster. So I think what you've seen overall is on the industry side, I think it's been embraced by a lot of technology workers. On the government side, I think it's going to force a re-examination of what the garrison looks like and what the place of work looks like. And I think that a lot of government agencies are actually leaning into that pretty well. So it's exciting.
Yeah, and to pivot off what Dylan was saying, I think what's really been discovered is the other types of work that can be done remotely that no one had ever really thought about. So how we were talking about this in previous discussions, like how you measure work output is much different nowadays when you have remote workers. So you've discovered, wow, we can have all of these other people work remote, and I don't need to look at them from 8 to 4 or whatever your timeline is. I really just need them to accomplish these tasks. So that's been a big impact.
Yeah, we have seen this particular the disruption of school has been a major impact, and someone from the audience actually made that comment. And really, what that's forced us to do is kind of, as you said, Dan, is re-examine what our expectations are for timeliness. And really, we've moved from an SLA based on 8 to 5 to business days. I don't really care if you get to it at 5 a.m. or 7 p.m. at night. If you need to take time in the afternoon for your family, do so. And I think what we're seeing is kind of a shift to a productivity-based model, which in a lot of ways, I think is going to benefit everybody. I mean, nobody wants to sit at a desk from 8 to 5 just because they have to be there. There's no value to that.
I had this further down in the outline to prepare, but since we sort of bridge that, both the technology sort of and the human impacts, let's talk about employee engagement for a second. And I, as someone who covers a lot of the publicly traded tier 1 government systems integrators, I've been struck by how many times they've been on these earnings calls with institutional investors and analysts that have they've started their opening script by talking in depth about some of the things they're doing for employee engagement and how for them this is the number one priority. And it can be easy to say, well, it's a boilerplate statement, but in reading the tone of their voices, yeah, that's a very real thing, and that they're concerned about and trying to reimagine that. And so, Dylan, just to start that with you touch on this. The disruption of school for example, is something that employees just have to deal with and is a fact of life. And so, what have been some of your priorities and things that you've done as a company to keep their employees engaged and also just support their well-being during this strange and bizarre summer that it's been?
So we're doubly blessed at the company I work for in the fact that we have an incredible marketing team who has transitioned from external marketing to internal marketing, and it's really done a lot to enable sort of internal reach out to our employees. And the other factor is we were prepared to work from home. We had adopted kind of a universal work from home policy a while ago. To Dan's point earlier, the government has a much bigger challenge, both from just scale. They have millions of employees to worry about, not dozens or even thousands, and also security, because these organizations, you cannot adopt the same type of commercial security practices that we use for DoD. That's one of the things we're focused on, is trying to commercialize government grade security. We're trying to make it as attainable to buy a government grade secure device as it is to buy an iPhone or Android device.
Gary?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we worked in a somewhat virtual environment. Like I manage a team of 9 guys, and all of them are all over the country. But in this scenario, we've had to really keep more touch. So there's more touch points with individual employees, but our company as a whole has also done a whole lot more from employee engagement. Yeah, we've gone from monthly town halls to every other week town halls. We've used social media tools like Yammer to actually do online contests between like best pet, best at home chef, school spirit, senior pictures. It's just been, our marketing group, just like Dylan was saying, has been great at kind of instituting these changes to the way we engage to make sure people are engaged. And through this, I've actually seen I've engaged with employees in our organization that typically on a day-to-day basis I would have never touched, but it keeps them engaged. And I think it actually has brought a lot of cohesivity to our culture here at Hitachi, that we have those tools and the collaboration tools. And I think those collaboration tools for the government are just as important in that case. And I think another thing in that employee engagement is make sure that people aren't overworking themselves, because working at home, you get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you get a cup of coffee, and then you look up, it's 5 p.m. We want to make sure that people are working their appropriate amounts and monitoring their productivity, because what I don't want to do is people are working, 14, 16 hours a day and burning out like, well, I haven't had a day off in so long. So many people had their vacations canceled. So it's important to encourage them to take time here and there as they can. So. Yeah,
to add on to what Gary said, so I of course work for Dell now, but I served as a Marine for 8 years and worked in IT as a Marine. And I would say, looking back on my time in the military and trying to equate that to what some of our folks in the government are doing today, trying to keep track as a manager and engaging on mental health is probably more critical now than it ever has been, right? Because you have to look at, of course, they have all of the stresses that they normally do with trying to deliver everything they do for work, along with a global pandemic and everything going on in the news and being trapped in a box of your house, right? You can't look at a probably more pressure-sensitive time in recent history. So for
one of the things we're seeing as being the most persistently annoying and disruptive activity is the reliability of consumer IT.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing such a broad group of folks who are not used to working from home and aren't IT people being forced into that role. And so what's going to be interesting to me is when does industry and the government make the shift to considering personal IT mission critical? When do we put an SLA around Comcast or Fios or your iPhone device? And I think that the software-defined kind of paradigm and zero trust is going to bring that to bear. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how broadly that gets looked at in the government space. And our government panelist friends, I'd love to hear the input from them, being their job is communication. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah.
Bill, any quick thoughts before we shift to more technical challenges?
It's interesting listening to you guys. I think you're far nicer than I am to the employees. That maybe it's a big company, you have to think about it, but we really think of ourselves still as pretty much a scrappy startup. And in our business, it feels like every day is about survival, and so you have to perform. It doesn't matter that the world's coming to an end. You have to perform. By the way, I respect that you care about your employees, and obviously I do too. But in our case, what we did is we made sure that the work itself wasn't increasing people's stresses too much by saying, look, you guys have to work from home. You got to take time for your kids. Just get the work done. And it speaks to a management style which we had, at least I had already. And it's the type that says, I trust all my employees and I believe that they all want to do a good job. And my job is to enable them to do a good job. We need to define what success looks like. We need to define what responsibilities are. But I believe that my people are going to try on their own initiative to get those things done. And that's a type of management that translates very well to a distributed workforce. There are still a significant fraction of people out there, managers and companies alike, not you guys, but there are a lot that sort of believe the opposite. They believe that they have to watch their employees, tell them what to do, move them from task to task, and if they're not watched, they won't get the job done. I bet you those managers are suffering a lot of stress right now because they can't watch their employees. But in our own anecdotal experience, where we had a little bit of that type and a little bit of the other type, we sent everybody home who could go home, and it turns out everything's fine. Everyone's actually still doing a good job. And so I mark that up as a success, a victory for the good guys who believe that people want to do good.
Okay, so I've been also sort of ticked on my ear to remind everybody watching this that we are taking and welcoming questions for our panelists, and what I should have noted is that the audience's job is to come up with better questions than the moderator can come up with. So please try to outshine me in that respect. It's going to the technical challenges, and three that I've hear also most about prior to coming in here is cybersecurity and secure remote access, just given the fact that with all of us being at home, we're all using essentially the same network connectivity to our workplaces, and also to that measuring productivity with people not being in the office, and some companies have that in place and some agencies may, but other organizations, perhaps there's some thinking outside the box there. Just sticking with the cyber point in particular, Gary, we'll start this with you. Sort of what are some of the challenges that you've seen in keeping those connections secure for the remote worker, and some solutions as well?
Yeah, I think most of them have been finding solutions that work with their authentication. So things like CAC-enabled applications, especially as it comes to data mobility solutions. I think making sure that you have appropriate multi-factor authentication in place is key to that, but also making sure that people only have access to the right data. We're all worried about people having access to data, but making sure that we're still maintaining those classifications of data and appropriate access and audit and logging of those data accesses, because the insider threat has kind of moved to the home, as it were, in a lot of instances. So, and I also think that security posture comes from also making sure that we're delivering the employees and the government employees the appropriate tools and technology to do it, whether it's a laptop, it's a mobile device, it's a mobile enabled app, whatever have you. So making sure that you don't kind of let your guard down around the cybersecurity aspects of it.
Yeah, to add to Gary's point, I can't imagine being a government CISO right now. It's got to be a bear. And here, one of the biggest factors is when you're looking at government work, right? Generally, they were very used to having people come to a building for a lot of work assets, right? And you control a lot of that physical infrastructure. You have people who have to, go through various things to get into buildings, to get into workplaces. Computers can be secured at the end of the day, so can files. Now you're counting on your people who are at their home to have a better understanding of the environment around them while they're working, right? Don't necessarily take your meeting on a open mic, full blast if it's a sensitive meeting, not even a classified meeting, just a sensitive topic, right? So a lot of education from a cybersecurity standpoint about surroundings, about maintaining and controlling data in physical workspaces now has to be shifted to home education. So
yeah, and just to kind of add on to that, we've had issues where we've had to educate people around, hey, don't do that meeting next to Alexa or the Google Home, or does anybody in your family have a Huawei phone or whatever, a ZTC phone or whatever it may be. So yeah, there's continual challenges that are continuing to pop up.
Yeah,
so
we're involved with the project that's enabling thousands of workers to access classified networks from the field. And the training and policy and accreditation has been the most complicated issue. The security standards are set. The NSA has a program called Commercial Solutions for Classified that enables that type of access, but the individual implementation is up to the AO and the organization that's doing it. And the security training and the behavioral training and policy development even has been extraordinarily complicated.
I would say if you think blue sky, what would be great, and we get to think this way sometimes because we don't have to code it today. But what would be great to be able to say, imagine a world where we are sending all our folks to work where they need to work, maybe closest to the data, or at home because they need to be there, or sometimes they're in an office, or sometimes they're in someone else's office. And what would be an ideal service platform for those guys? And it would be to be able to get the data that they need, wherever they need it, whenever they need it, keep it secure. Let's set the bar that high. Let's say that that's actually what we want to do. Because what often happens is we get tripped up down here with a bunch of guys just saying, no, that's not what the policy says. And so, procurement vehicles go get developed around, let's buy the old stuff because that's approved. That's easy to buy. We're allowed to buy that. But they're not actually hitting the goal. The goal is let people work efficiently and keep the data secure, not let's just keep the data secure, right? They're missing the whole second half, which is it's all about people and productivity, because this is thought work. This is brain power that we need to put into action. And you do that with information these days. So let's raise the bar. Let's say, don't take no and don't assume that you can't do it. Figure out how you really can do it, and let's get to work on it.
Yeah, and Bill, what I appreciate about what you guys are doing and other members of the panel are doing is we're not taking the sort of traditional IT approach of putting something out. We know we're going to have to patch, right? We know that the edition we put out isn't secure. We are seeing a transition of these hyper secure systems becoming available at consumer-ish availability, and that's a transition that I believe that the government is really trying to take advantage of. I mean, we have seen just a massive increase in interest in those types of platforms, and it's something that I think is going to enable that new workforce you're describing, Bill, of being able to work wherever you need to work.
One of the levers in Facilitate, and I've also got to mention again, keep the audience questions coming. We have a few minutes left before I'll turn it over to you. But one of the levers for sort of helping facilitate efficient and disparate workforces, just everything under the automation umbrella with artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, you name it, an acronym or buzzword, it's under that umbrella. From an industry point of view, what are some of the ways that you see industry helping DISA and some other agencies help turn that into reality? Start with Dan.
Yeah, so where we have been doing a lot of work with organizations like NIST, right? In working with their NCCOE, which is their Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, on developing reference architectures to answer a lot of these problems, right? And they aren't, when you work with NIST, what's nice about that is that you're focused on trying to, exactly like you highlighted, define what the problem is, and then pull in a lot of different voices from industry to focus on it and create a reference architecture that can be agnostic, right? So at the end of the exercise, there is a solution to answer what I'd say are some of these emerging problems. So working with them and other government labs, I think is going to be really huge over this next couple of years on these type of problems.
Gary, very quickly.
Yeah, I think industry has infused a lot of AI and ML into their tools that they can offer the government. And I think it's time to really take a hard and critical look at them as increasing their adoption, because we're hesitant to change as humans. It's just our nature. If we have something that works, we want it. But I think a lot of these AI and ML enabled tools can really make their operations more efficient and safe and more effective at the end of the day. So,
Bill?
I like a William Gibson quote, which is, the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. So there are places where AI and ML are already being put to productive use, and there's a lot of places where it's not. Over the next 10 years, 10 years from now, we're not even going to be thinking about these tools. They're going to be supporting our workflow. They're going to be identifying issues with network connectivity and solving them without us even being involved. The challenge is to find the practical implementations for them and not necessarily buy into the industry hype. And I know I'm in industry, but industry loves to hype stuff, right? And it's hard to, so I don't like to see people sort of buying into, let's set aside $100 million to do an ML project. What are we going to get out of it? We don't know, or we just have to try. I don't think that's the right approach. I think let's define what you really want it to do and then make it work for that problem. Over time, we will definitely be using these tools.
Great. We got a pretty interesting question here just on employee engagement and networking. And I know that as a journalist and maybe some others on here as well, I took advantage of this whole in-person event calendar that happens in the government market. I took it for granted, and now we don't have that. We all now get to see each other on little bubbles on the screen, such as we are now. And so I'll pose this question to the group, and we'll go around the horn on this well. Given the current state and forced physical distancing, how are you observing the development of new trusted relationships? What media, social constructs, meetups are you seeing? We'll start with Dylan.
You know, I was really worried about that when this new reality was kind of enforced on it, and there's no question it's had a major impact. But I have seen a surprising willingness to engage in these non-traditional sort of social constructs. I mean, before COVID, I don't think we would have gotten this type of participation from, these type of virtual events. Virtual events used to be kind of an afterthought, and you'd accept invitations to them, you wouldn't show up, and you wouldn't really care because it's a virtual event, it's not real. And this is the new real. And so, to a certain extent, there is no substitute for being in person. But I think that the forced distancing has created sort of a natural longing for people to connect. And when you can see the person you're talking to, it really does go a long way towards bridging that gap between, being in a chat room on the internet and being in person at an event.
Yeah, Bill, we can't exchange business cards in person anymore, like in the pre-COVID days. But what new developments and constructs have you observed?
Oh yeah, I used to use my Palm Pilot to IRU my business card. Remember way back when, 20 years ago. We do everything electronically, and honestly, from my perspective, we haven't seen a difference. The in-person trade shows, I do miss them. I do miss just meeting people randomly, and you don't meet people randomly. I haven't seen a great tool yet for meeting people randomly. That's missing, and it's probably $1 billion idea for someone to go and implement. But video, these kinds of video sessions.
I thought that's what the dating apps were for. You swipe right or left.
I haven't tried those.
Are we onto something here? Are we onto something here? I think we might be onto something here. Yeah. Is LinkedIn on this call?
Yeah. Yeah, we've actually used LinkedIn a lot more for finding people that we want to talk to. So that's helped. This has actually been an opportunity to prove the value of electronic marketing for companies like us that need to go find people and find the right people. It's just, because you can't do it in person, we shifted the budget over to using electronic means, and it's proved itself out pretty well. But I will still say that sort of randomly running into somebody at a trade show, I haven't seen a great substitute for that.
Gary, Dan, any quick thoughts from either of you?
Yeah. So
Dan first.
Thank you. What I would say is that I agree with Dylan's position that virtual conferences have become very big, and probably one of the biggest reason is because it's just other people to engage with and talk to. Right? Being sheltered inside of your house. I love my family. Don't get me wrong, but I cannot wait to get back on the road again. I think everybody on this call, if you're a road warrior, you know what I'm talking about. But this virtualization and events like this and the capability to get on with folks like you and talk, I think has really helped a lot of people. So,
Gary, last thoughts? No, there's no substitute for running into somebody and just swapping the business cards, but how have you seen people work around that?
Yeah, and I think all the virtual campaigns, the webinars, all those things are key. But one of the things that I've actually seen be very successful this time is we've kind of gone back to the future to actually calling people and actually just having one-on-one conversations. And I've found since March or whenever this really started is people are more receptive because they want to have that contact. And this kind of replaces those trade shows. The ability to interchange ideas with somebody one-on-one on an old-fashioned telephone, and call them. I get more calls back from customers now than I ever did before March. So that'll tell you, that human contact, again, employee engagement, customer engagement is important to this.
Okay. Well, one of these days, and this will happen, I imagine that I will run into some of you again randomly at a trade show. Hope that future is sooner rather than later. But thank you to our panelists, Bill Anderson, Dan Carroll, Dylan Connor, and Gary Hicks. And now to transition to the DISA panel, turn it over to Lauren McCarty from Hitachi Vantara Federal. So Lauren, over to you.
Thanks, Ross. Hitachi Vantara Federal is an end-to-end data services provider focused on supporting our federal customers. We're an active member of AFCEA, and I thank you for hosting this great event today. We're also a proud supporter of DISA and their mission. And now I'd like to introduce today's DISA panel. Carlin Kapnos, Director, Office of Small Business Programs with DISA. Carissa Landymore, Chief, Cloud Storage, DISA. Lieutenant Colonel Nicholas Ziegler, Senior Innovations Officer, Emerging Technology Directorate, DISA. And moderating today's panel is Dr. Brian Herman, Director and PEO, Services Development Directorate, DISA.
Hey, good afternoon. Appreciate everybody taking the time to join the group here. I'm very impressed with the panel that we had from our industry teammates, and we certainly appreciate the contributions that you make to helping us accomplish our mission. I think we'll have an interesting conversation relative to both some of the technical things that we've done and we see in the future, and some of the maybe soft side kind of personal skill kind of things that have changed as a result of trying to find what I think our British friends called new ways of working. And so we'll take a little bit of a dive into that. So my first question, I'll start with Carissa. In your area, what's been the biggest, either unexpected or expected, challenge in meeting the department's need to shift to max telework throughout the pandemic?
Thank you, sir, and thank you so much for having me today. So to kick things off, I don't know for how many of you are familiar with MailDrive, but MailDrive is a cloud storage solution that provides, it's very similar to in your personal life if you're using Dropbox or maybe Google Drive at home, except here inside DISA, we are hosted on-prem in DISA's data centers, offering an extra layer of security. We've got, the two-factor authentication, we're CAC enabled. And when COVID hit, within 30 days, we had to jump into gear and assist the department. So we were able to increase our storage capacity by 400%. We deployed a SIPRNet instance. And throughout MailDrive's automated service delivery, we were able to provision over 50,000 users within 1 week. We also were able to receive emergency funding so that we could offer the service completely free of charge through fiscal year 20 to support the department. We didn't want them to have to worry about any funding. We wanted to be able to support operations and make sure that we could get a service out there without any impact. We were also starting to see, hey, a lot of people are having to VPN in. So how do we mitigate that? So offering the service over the commercial internet for our users to try to mitigate some of that stress on the network was another feature that we went ahead and enabled as well. And something that we found to be extremely interesting, and I realized pretty quickly, hey, I'm pretty spoiled working at DISA. We've got a lot of tools available to us with having a government furnished equipment, but not all of the department has that available to them. So we wanted to make sure that by offering this via the commercial internet, that folks would be able to continue that collaboration and have access to their data, be able to get to their personal data, be able to work with others quickly and efficiently. So we were really able to jump in quickly, working with our industry partners and working with other DISA program offices to provide a capability to give you access via the web, on your mobile devices, and to continue that work regardless of device or location.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's those are good examples of things that we did that had a large impact across the department. And to some of the comments that were in chat earlier, as Carissa made mention. There was some emergency funding that was necessary to make that happen. So it wasn't like we were completely prepared in that sense. We had some tools, but it took some scaling and it took some funding to make that happen. Lieutenant Colonel Ziegler's in the innovation portion of the agency, and I'll ask the same question to you. Kind of what were the big expected or unexpected challenges that you guys have been faced with, and what have you done to help the department get to max telework?
Hey, Roger, sir. So I think a lot of the similar discussion points of how do we get to this mobile solution? How do we get to an endpoint that's as secure as possible? I think some of the other panels and things we've talked about before, from multi-factor authentication. So a lot of the capabilities that the Emerging Technologies Director is looking at already were just pushed to the forefront of deployability. We initially were looking at things like continuous multi-factor authentication. How do you use the biometrics, both contextual and hard biometrics, on the endpoint in order to frictionlessly validate the user is who they say they are? You know, CMFA has been a big portfolio for the EM team for about 3 years now. Additionally, we're looking at BYOD. How do you do a bring your own device environment where we're leveraging next generation thin client type models in order to push data to the endpoint, but not leave any residue at the endpoint? So you combine now multi-factor authentication off of a personal device controlled by a thin client or a virtual mobile environment that emulates an Android or Apple experience at the phone, and you move the residual data that would stay on the phone, or that reason that you'd have to have, you know, data at rest and other protocols that we use. We just push them to the forefront. You know, another big thing that we were working on was the window DAR experience, having this, you know, Windows experience for commercial solutions for classified, or having SIPR or classified data on a desktop or laptop. So we were already working on those as pilots, and they pushed them or leaped them to the forefront of requirements. We went from, you know, an initial 50 to 80 deployable solutions to, I think we're now up to about 1,000 and growing. And another big thing for us was, how do we get additional, you know, SIPR or classified mobile experiences out there, as users aren't coming back into work, and that is our tactical, or that is our mission network that we use. So those were some big hitters at the beginning, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that in the first, 3 to 4 weeks, perhaps, folks thought this might be a passing fad, something that we had to deal with, and there was the thought that it was okay to put some missions off, but as you pointed out, we had a tremendous lift that was necessary to be able to begin to do some of that work that just had to happen, and we had to do it in a safe manner. So I think that's a great point. Carlin, I know your mission specifically is a little different in terms of working with industry from the agency's perspective. How would you respond to that, those challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I have a completely different viewpoint from Carissa and Nick. One, I'm old, and they aren't. And so I've, been successful in my career with the face-to-face interaction with everybody. I have a contracting and a small business background, so I'm not a technical person. And again, I've always treated things that it's easier to look at somebody and know what they're thinking, or that you're conveying your meaning to them and it's being accepted. In fact, I had a rule at DISA that all my meetings were in person, and if you were in the building, you were coming down to my meeting. I had extra chairs in my office. We didn't do anything virtual in my world. So when we shifted to, and I didn't believe in telework either. So when we went to this 100% telework, and I'm technically challenged, just figuring out how all the crap worked. I had a friend who's watching this, Chris Riley. I'm like, help me. And so he helps me figure out when to turn VPN off and not. So for me to actually be sitting here going, oh my God, I could telework forever. So for me, figuring it out from the technology side of it, how to get it to work, how to meet with industry, how to continue to communicate with industry from sitting at my desk instead of sitting across from the table or in a training room with 100 people in it, and providing those opportunities for our industry partners to network with each other, to exchange that business card. That's what we've been focusing on the last several months. And in some of the other questions, we'll tell you how we've done it. And I think we're doing an okay job at it. But I have to thank all my technical friends for getting me there. Over.
Thanks, Carlin. I'll add a couple of thoughts on my own as well. In partnership with industry and with the DoD CIO and the Cloud Computing Program Office, CVR was stood up the Commercial Virtual Remote Environment, which has changed the game for how the department is accessing collaborative capabilities. And it set expectations at a completely different level for us. So access to that, access to be able to collaborate, which is something I feel very strongly about. But I tended to think along Carlin's lines, which is, face-to-face is my preferred method of doing that. So Colonel Ziegler's points about adding access to classified networks and other services that you wouldn't normally take home has been a big challenge for us. Essentially, from the department's perspective, all of our thinking was protect the boundary, and now we said we have to have a smart boundary that allows folks in and think about things like zero trust as we go forward. So thinking about that as we move forward, and knowing a little bit more about DoD's kind of pressing needs in the next 6 to 12 months, what are you and your teams working on to try to meet those requirements? And I'll go to Carlin first, kind of focusing on her mission as well on that one.
So our pressing needs is really to ensure that we continue to communicate with industry. That one thing that we've said from the very beginning is that we're open for business, that we never shut down. And again, really speaking from the contracting side and the small business side, how do we keep in touch with industry? How do we let them know, hey, we've updated a forecast? And sometimes it's something as simple as that low-tech email to an email list saying, hey, we have a new forecast, it's up there, or we're still meeting and engaging with it. So the pressing needs for us is figuring out how to use our tools, figuring out what platforms work, making sure that we're attending all of the opportunities that we get to speak with industry and let them know how to communicate back with us. For example, we do a DISA 101 small business orientation, and we had been experimenting with some online versions for those that weren't in the immediate area. So we tried it out on our internal DCS collaboration tool, and our first month that we tried it with a pilot with 5 vendors, we failed. None of them were able to connect, so we had to get some more help on how to get through our firewall. But we were doing this beforehand, so when we had to cancel our first in-person one in March, when we weren't going into the office, we had to convert to all of it being virtual and then catching up with industry, because we were one of the few small business offices around the DoD that was actually still working and still engaging. Our counterparts at NSA and Cybercom, they weren't working, only Mission Essential folks were in. So we were getting a lot of people coming to us saying, hey, how can we still work? And I'm like, it's business as usual here. So we figured out how to do that, and that was the first thing that we needed to get done, and the rest is continuing to work with our counterparts at places like AFCEA and Fort Meade Alliance that have the ability to use the Zoom format that we don't, or the Adobe or the WebEx, until we can get, or at least I can get a camera on our teams to use my GFE. So figuring out the balance between personal computers and eventually getting onto our GFE to continue the open lines of communication with industry. Over.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting kind of to speak to how we how our large annual engagements, things like industry days and the like, and to the earlier panel's discussion. It may not be dating apps; it may be those LinkedIn and social media kind of accounts. But I think there's something to that about how we pick up the mantle of that real engaged kind of collaboration that we've always had primarily by face-to-face. But given our own security requirements, it's not always been easy to get into our facilities either. So we've always had to do some measure of that stuff. So Carissa, from your perspective, given what you see in the next 6 to 12 months, what are you and your teams working on to try to meet kind of the DoD's new demand signal?
Yeah, sir, Mill Drive Anywhere has always been our bread and butter, right? Our focus is to provide personal and group data storage capabilities. But fortunately, the last year or so, we've and especially recently with everything going on with the pandemic, we've had the opportunity to talk to more folks across the department and different agencies and quickly understand that, hey, we need to expand our portfolio and try to make sure we can cover all of their storage requirements. So we quickly are going to, in the next 6 months, if not sooner, we're going to be expanding and extending our product portfolio to provide capacity and edge. Now, capacity will provide server-to-server and application data to support server offloading, low transaction, and archive storage. And last but not least, Edge, we're really excited about as well. We've received a lot of feedback from different folks about this one, which Edge is going to allow us to extend to the warfighter and the battlefield. It's going to offer the Edge client and gateway services, which will meet a long list of requirements for today's data mobility. So we're really excited to be working with our mission partners and capturing all their requirements and making sure we've got a full suite of cloud storage solutions, kind of a one-stop shop where folks can come for any cloud storage needs.
Thanks, Carissa. I think essentially what you're speaking about relative to that data function is really the nirvana position where we want to be able to say that the desktop or the laptop or whatever device that you're using, whatever mobile device even, doesn't matter nearly as much as the where the data is stored in a secure way so that you can access it from any place. And I think that's what we're really shooting for. Absolutely, sir.
I forgot one thing when you're talking about, how do we support COVID? We worked closely with our mobility office. They have a WinDAR, Windows Data at Rest device, where we worked with them to provide a it's web access for Mill Drive, but imagine like a zipper laptop, if you will. So for folks, and 6 months ago, that's something we never would have thought about, but it became very, very important to have access to that data quickly on both the unclassified and classified during this pandemic. And I think that's paving the way for the future.
Thank you. Nick, your thoughts on kind of trying to meet the demands for the department in the next 6 to 12 months?
So I think this is a great one for me to follow Carissa on, because Carissa is data-centric, she's data-focused, and we're really focused on the endpoint right now. And the reason I say that is it's not COVID that's driving the endpoint, it's the future, right? The endpoint itself, the mobile solution that the generations behind us are using right now. I think we've already had the topic of discussion about age and generational gaps that are kind of bringing us to this focus of cost associated with the endpoint. If you don't have a GFE that's issued to you currently, what are you using? You're using your personal device. You're using things that you, just to get access. Right now, we've got Zoom, we've got Duo, we've got all these other capabilities that if you do have a government furnished piece of equipment, you don't have cameras turned on. You don't have the ability to download certain apps that aren't approved. You don't have all these things. I think you even said earlier, sir, about IL5, CBR, these collaboration tools that 300,000 service members are already on and have become so used to it that it is now a part of their future. And so we're dedicating our time to, in the next 6 to 12 months, is how do we get those costs associated to BYOD or your device environment down so that the desktop converged environment becomes a possibility, to where if you currently have a NIPR device at your work, a SIPR device at your work, and now you're getting NIPR and SIPR deployable devices that are mobile, you're costing the government thousands of dollars just to get access from multiple locations, to where if you're paying for your own data and you're paying for your own transport, and the DoD is willing to make sure that it's secure enough for you to access all of that data from a personal device, then we're talking about cost savings, we're talking about speed, and we're also talking about the ability to bring younger generations into the DoD where they're used to a mobile endpoint in their hand and using it in the same way that they do at home as well as on the job. Over.
Excellent point. Yeah, I think it is the device. We're just hitting the accelerator, kind of with COVID. From a and I'll ask anybody that wants to weigh in on this. Getting away from technology for just a second. In the next phase of what we're going through right now, are there specific policies that you see necessary to change in the department that we really need to work on, and what do you know about what's being done for that?
Yeah, I'll jump in since that's kind of where I live, right, in the bureaucratic policy debates that I'm constantly in down at the Pentagon. I'll say there's three. I'll keep them real quick. BYD is a huge policy. Well, it's really the Admiral Norton's push is bring your own approved device. So it still needs to meet some of the NIST, some of the NIAP, and some of the other accreditations out there for mobile platforms. So we are looking at it from an antiquated environment, but we're pushing hard at the DoD CIO and all these other councils I sit on for that. The second one is really the policies around the capability of the device, right? There's a lot of push to remove cameras, to remove microphones, to basically archaically step back these devices into a world where you get a keyboard and a monitor. So policy is not only not allowing things, but it's also stepping back. And so that's another one. And then I would say even the third one again is the ability to allow other things in the spaces that are no longer considered authorized. So before you used to go into a government facility with your personal device, and that personal device had, your contacts on it, your family people could contact you on it. But now we've stepped those out of facilities due to concerns of vulnerability of those mobile endpoints. So looking at how the policies will reshape that, if a DoD or government employee has this device with these capabilities and these policies pushed against it, whether a mobile device manager or whether some type of hardware-based backing to it, those policies right now, even if technology met them, which we all know right now, if you live in this world, technology can inhibit or prohibit certain things from happening at the endpoint just based off of things put on them. But our policies, meaning how the system is run, does not currently allow for any of these technologies to be tested in government facilities, and it doesn't really allow us to figure out the ability to bring our own personal devices and use device capabilities to their full functioning capability. Over.
Excellent points. Any Carlin or Carissa, any thoughts on policies? So not necessarily a policy in and of itself, but it's changing the way we work. I would say that one observation I've had, and you guys can speak to this in any of your comments, is changing the way managers think about supervision to be something more outcome-based, where we're focused on managing expectations. And I've seen all of those same kinds of concerns about the subset of your team that are working 12 plus hours a day, and the others that you're not quite sure exactly what they're doing. And thoughts on how that's how we resolve that, I think, is an interesting concern as well. But I would say, it's probably among almost everybody in the audience, the broadly accepted premise is that COVID-19 was a game-changing milestone, and it's permanently altered accepted norms for on-site work and teamwork. Do you agree or disagree? And then how do you think that will affect DISA and our relationships with industry partners and the support we provide to combatant commands and military departments? Over to you first, Nick.
Yeah, so I think I've hit it before, sir, but I think the biggest thing for us is really how do we incorporate all of these collaboration tools moving forward, right? That the services are all going after their own capabilities based off of their own requirements. So you've got Army chasing X, you've got Air Force chasing Y, you've got Navy chasing Z based off of their requirements. And those requirements are really looking for an enterprise solution, right? That this may be the post-COVID way of the future, but that post-COVID way of the future will have different, come back to work requirements and different collaboration solutions, and each one of these different IL environments that keep getting placed onto it. So, those different things of how you incorporate the best in breed, the best mobile solutions, the best capabilities out there, and also be able to get the services on the same page with, here are the 9 out of 10 requirements that we have, and here are the best in breed that we have. And that's really what we look at in EM, is how do we do this emerging technology review and provide education to all of the DoD on what we're looking at in the future, so that you can provide that base capability for this COVID or post-COVID environment, and then the services can spend their dollars on their tactical requirements. Because this collaboration solutions that we're looking at right now for at home doesn't translate into a forward-leaning tactical environment all the time. And so by taking off some of that stress from the services, we allow them to go ahead and take and put all of their efforts into something that they see from their tactical environment, whether land, sea, or air.
Yeah, excellent points. Carlin, your thoughts?
So I totally agree that it's going to be different going forward, and some things will be different in a good way, and some things will be different in a bad way. I think not having the face-to-face communication and interaction and networking that our office tries to facilitate several times a year, and having to pivot from in-person Small Business 101 orientations to, we were planning our first big matchmaking in-person event with Fort Meade Alliance, and we're meeting tomorrow to see can we change it to virtual. And we'll see what tools we have to do that. On the other hand, our office has been able to take advantages of some other virtual matchmaking sessions that we wouldn't have gone to in the future. Either they were too far away, or we didn't know enough about the organization to see if it would be fruitful or value added for us to participate. We did one with the U.S. Women's Chamber of Commerce, and we're able to meet with 19 different women-owned small businesses in one day. And normally when you do it, you're so physically and mentally exhausted, and then you have to get home from DC or wherever. Whereas here I could sit at my desk, and at the end of the day, you're actually a little more energized because you met a whole bunch of companies that we didn't know about. So I think going forward, it's just the perspective of what is value added, what things can we do better, more efficiently, without having to travel, without having to take away time from getting work done to go do things. Vice still having that ability to network. And so instead of doing physical networking for our small business 101s, we now have them fill out cards ahead of time with the same things they would have said and would have done. And then instead of handing them out, we email them out. So we're doing the best that we can. We're trying to listen to industry. We're trying to actually even work with our internal PMs, Brian, you know this, to say, hey, can we do some small group things where we're only going to take an hour of the PM's time, but get him contact with potential contractors that can help solve problems, or can provide them information, or just give them that contact that industry really wants from our end users and our requirements owners. So, you know, good and the bad, figure out what works, and just keep moving forward. Over.
Thanks, Carlin. Carissa, your thoughts? Did this change the game forever?
Definitely. You know, I think it opened up the community's eyes to do things remotely. You know, MilDrive, I keep going back to that, but there's so many tools out there that have been available but haven't had a high adoption rate, because a lot of folks are just comfortable sticking with what they're used to, right? They're comfortable sticking with that legacy solution. And so COVID kind of gave us all that push that said, we've got to start adopting. This is the way of doing business now. And I think people have been pleasantly surprised to see that they can now do things cheaper and faster, more effectively, more efficiently, which is kind of, helped us get over that initial hurdle of, gosh, I don't know if I'm ready to take this on, but it got us there. And sir, you brought up about the workforce and management earlier. What was interesting for me and my team with MilDrive is we initially thought, hey, this is going to be a sprint. We got to get there. We've got to deliver a capability. But then we quickly realized this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And so I quickly had to let the team know, hey, we were doing 24/7 ops 7 days a week, but we've all have families at home, right? I have little kids, and it became really difficult to have a good work-life balance. So we quickly had to say, try really hard to work your normal core hours, have a better quality of life, try to work that work-life balance, and understand that, sometimes your family's going to take you away. They're all here at home and they're all being impacted by this. So as long as you're meeting your deliverables, it might not be in that core hours, but as long as you're getting it done, that's going to have to work because there's a lot of other people impacted by this in our home as well. So it's been interesting to have to try to change the way my team thinks about that, but it's slowly starting to become adopted, and I think we're seeing finally a better work-life balance and getting used to this.
Great points. I also kind of think that it has changed the game. I would even go a little bit farther to some of the policies and things that we might need to take a look at as we go forward. I think hiring is going to change. We happen to have a headquarters located in the National Capital Region, but there's really no reason we couldn't take advantage of talent that's in Kansas, frankly. And so if we can get great people and they can live where they can be productive and be near family and do all the things that they need to do to support themselves, we're likely to have happier, more productive folks. And to your point about how that sprint turned to a marathon, we've had to just encourage people to start jumping in and taking leave. You may not be taking leave for that great vacation to Europe or what have you, but it's leave. It's with your family. It's time to recharge, and that's been a challenge because initially folks, just weren't taking any of it at all. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit here. So there's some great questions popping up, and we'll get to those in the chat window there. I think it's fair to say, and we touched on some of this. DISA has shined, I think, in the last 5 months in terms of, as an organization, being prepared and for ourselves, for our own workforce, and to flex and solve DoD problems. What things did you do, or as you look back, to prepare for this, and how has this experience kind of changed your mission focus going forward? Carlin, any thoughts?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, we had thought about doing some virtual DISA 101s, and we tried it and didn't work out the first time, got it the second time, and by the time this came around, we had 3 or 4 under our belt, and now we're getting better at it. We can get 30 users on the phone and actually have everybody ask questions, and we've altered our slides to talk about the things they want to versus having it more led by those that were in the audience where you could see what they were looking at. But the one thing that I will tell you from a DISA standpoint and from the contracting side of it is that because we never shut down, because we actually picked up the pace, once we all went virtual, and again, I was a naysayer for telework because I actually thought when people were teleworking, they weren't actually working. But maybe it turns out that when they were in the office, they weren't working either. I don't know. But we've seen a huge uptick on the contracting and small business side of it. At this point, we're already $1.2 billion ahead of the spend from last year, which that's 20% faster, more executed, where we haven't had that much more income or more money to spend. And so I think the fact that not only did we just throw the audible to go to telework, but we worked faster, better, more efficiently. When we look at the COVID dollars, seeing if that was a big uptick, and we've had over 500 single actions of contracts for COVID. And from my standpoint, the good part is about 70% of those dollars were executed for small businesses. So industry was reacting quickly to us having to get things out and on contract to support the other technical missions to get the communications going. So I think just the fact that we were already set up for telework, it was really just making sure that we knew schedule your conference calls not on the top of the hour because nobody could get in initially. But you figure out those things pretty quickly. And, I think the fact that we just kept moving forward, I think DISA really was more prepared than some of our other counterparts on Fort Meade. So anyway, that's
fair enough. I agree. Carissa, your thoughts?
We've been preparing for this for a while. Mildred declared FOC a couple years ago, but we saw some folks quickly adopt and they wanted to get into this next generation file service, but there wasn't always that quick adoption that we wanted, and COVID kind of showed us that it was all about the education. So our focus has really been trying to give folks brown bags, have these virtual learning areas where people can reach us weekly and we can walk them through a central forum where they can walk through and answer any questions, have videos instead of 10-page documents that teach them how to use the service. Now we've got videos that kind of walk you through how to use the service for that visual learner. We still have these one-page quick reference guides that point to pictures, but wanting to open up that education opportunity to have it more virtual so people feel like, I can't physically reach out and touch you and get the help I need, but at least they're there virtually, however often they need it, so that they don't feel kind of secluded, stuck at home and get frustrated, right? We want to make sure we've got all the education we can and the tools to help them be successful in their day-to-day operations. So that's what we're focused on, sir.
Thank you. That's I think you guys are probably being almost too modest in a lot of areas. I think we had language in DISA that was to Lieutenant Colonel Ziegler's point, was focused on jointness so that we could have joint collaboration. Where when I used to wear a different color uniform, we maybe focused primarily on within our own service kind of needs. So that's one of the areas I think DISA really shines. We've talked about things that I think are maybe legacy terms like continuity of operations, COOP, for years. And when we had an exercise, Purple Phoenix, last October, one of the comments was, well, why do we have a subset of folks going to a specific location instead of just working from their houses? It really kind of depends on what the emergency is that should drive us to respond in a way. And this is just a whole new kind of emergency. And I think by and large, the pieces were there, but we hadn't put them together quite in the same way that we have today. We historically might have had years long worth of effort to do a traditional acquisition within the agency. Now you find that there's an appetite where there's a need like there is now. There's the ability to execute some of that much more quickly than we had before. So the agency put together a lot of additional circuits, additional VPNs, a tremendous amount of work at the internet access points to protect us and to try to beef up the amount of capacity we had. But we also did things like the cloud-based internet isolation so that we can have security happen outside of the DoD's networks and not risk bringing questionable traffic into the DoD and have effectively traffic going through VPNs and internet access points. I think a lot of stuff was going on that maybe people didn't know about, and I have to give you guys a lot of credit for the things that you've been able to do in that area. So I want to shift us over and take a look at some of these questions. So I think Nick, the first one's for you. It's about BYOD being kind of that nirvana state, and we know that commercial baselines for mobile devices aren't all secured in a way that we feel comfortable with. So what do you have to say to that relative to this new way of working?
Yeah, so the cool thing about BYOD is it has been around 15 years. I feel like my entire career we've talked about this amazing environment called BYOD. But the advancement in technology is really what's going on. So one of the things we're looking at right now, and it's about a 10,000 user pilot in which we're using virtual mobile infrastructure. So we're taking, hardware that's sitting inside of an eco center right next to the DISA data and the data that Carissa is talking about and all the different things that the services want to have access to. And so we're sitting these emulated Android devices inside of this server environment, and we're essentially doing a dual VPN down to the endpoint. So what that means is you're creating an outer gray tunnel, similar to if anybody's done a commercial solution for classified type environment, in which you create an outer VPN and then you do an inner TLS, which is just another access capability inside. So at this mobile endpoint or this BYOD approved device, you'll have a credential, whether on something like a YubiKey or something similar to that. We have about 3 different solutions where we're looking at on-device credentials using our purebred solution, which is a common access card derived credential that we put inside of a device. A YubiKey solution type where we have an actual hard device that you put a key pair on, you tie it into the device, and then you make a call to use those keys, similar like we do on a computer right now. And then the third solution is something similar to those Duo, Okta type environments where you're providing MFA architecture to validate the user to spin up that outer VPN. And so when you start to talk about the security models and the base concerns, by having a virtual environment that you're connecting to, that data never comes to the device. So those concerns of cyber environments where you could steal device off the data, you could replay different things, those things are being pushed to the side based off of these virtual environments. And really, that to me, that's the wave of the future, to where the endpoint becomes just a pass-through. It's just a visualization of something else that's behind our perimeter. And so when you think of JRSS, you think of all these different security protocols that we put inside of our perimeter in order to defend against nation states and near-peer environments. By virtualizing the stream, you're sitting at your home behind multiple layers of security, validating that there's nothing side-loaded or nothing is vulnerable at the kernel level where data wouldn't be encrypted or decrypted by using these things. And then once you turn off the client, you no longer have access to the DoD environment. You no longer are seeing these streamed video pixels. It's a device that you could just use in whatever way you want to. And then we have other things in kind of the comply to connect environment, to where if you were to do something nefarious or a nefarious environment was created on that endpoint, we have all these other capabilities that are doing constant checking. And so now you start to open up this world of, yes, a NIAP approved device doesn't mean anything specific to most users, but when you put the entire enterprise defensive mechanism against that endpoint and give data to the user in a real-time manner, that's when you start to look at the experiences and the capabilities and the resources that we're putting towards that BYOD environment. Over.
Sorry, excellent points, Nick. I appreciate that. I think a lot is going on relative to that in the mobile device area, and certainly the convergence of the desktop. But we're seeing, as an example, kind of tying a few things together in the world or the population across the Department of Defense. The Army primarily has a tremendous number of Guard and Reserve components that don't have government furnished equipment, and so getting to that approved device configuration is absolutely essential for them to continue to be productive going forward. Carissa, good question for you here. How will expanding cloud service offerings change the way DISA does business?
Sir, I think that's a tag team with Geos. So I think we're seeing it today with the way Teams is helping the department. It's providing a lot more collaboration. They're going to have in-document collaboration. I think they're going to have a one-stop shop for all cloud-related solutions. MillDrive right now is looking at how can we integrate with these other cloud services so that you've got an option for agencies that maybe want to stay on-prem, or can continue to work off-prem. One will be IL5, right? And we'll have the equivalent with our ATO. So I think, it's all about that integration and making sure we've got a full Office suite of solutions and a one-stop shop for all cloud-related services.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree. So to answer the other question that was in there about CVR and O365 going forward, right now the department's moving out with sort of a federated model of tenants in the IL5 for Office or Microsoft 365, depending on who you ask. And that's an example of a SaaS offering that really does affect everybody. It's going to be essentially a clean slate versus transferring over a lot of information from CVR. We'll pull that plug on the 15th of December and move on to the long-term solution. And so that's made us adjust quite a little bit, but I think it's accelerated what we've been trying to do for years in the DIOS acquisition, and I'm excited about the opportunity. With that, I think we've reached our time limit. So if you have additional questions, certainly we will be willing to reach out and talk with you guys at any time. Carlin is probably more connected than anybody is here, but I'll turn it over to our host Jimmy Atkins for a closeout.
Yeah, this is Mike Quinn. I'll step in case Jimmy's not available. As things go, Jimmy, are you there? Because I did hear you were having some connectivity issues. I'll let you close it out. If not, we've been tag teaming this from the beginning, and I'll be glad to close it out with the thank yous. Okay. I will take that silence. Can everybody hear me first of all? Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Hey, anyway, Brian, the panel, thank you so much on behalf of AFCEA DC and Joe Decker and Jimmy and myself and the sponsors. We really appreciate the time. The mission of DISA is crucial to all of us and the customers that you guys support. It's making a difference. There's been a lot of interesting comments coming both through the chat and the text and kind of behind the scenes here. And one suggestion is we could actually maybe revisit this panel again in 6 months to see what has really changed. So anyway, I wanted to thank you and for participating today. And if there's anything else that needs to be done with housekeeping or anything else like that with the AFCEA team, just let me know. Okay. Thanks again for all of the close to 200 people that participated over the afternoon and everybody else. We appreciate your sponsorship and your patience with us today. And some of this may also be available on the AFCEA DC website, just like the Military Awards IT is, and just like everything we do here at AFCEA. So thanks again and have a great day.